A very good morning to one and all present here. I am Sarmistha Choudhury. I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Education, University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya. So today I am going to discuss a very interesting topic, that is communication. So communication plays a very important role in our day-to-day life because every time we are communicating with others, right? So communication is basically, it is called a process, and through this process we're trying to exchange our ideas, some new information, our own thoughts, our feelings, as well as our emotions to others, right? And while we are communicating with other person, we are using our speech. Now also I am using my speech, some signals, right? Sometimes we are also using some non-verbal cues, and also we can use some writing materials, right? So communication, basically it is a process, and in this process we are trying to exchange some new information, some ideas, some feelings, thoughts and emotions to others, right? And while we are communicating, we are using our speech, some signals also sometimes we are using, and some writing materials also we can use in this process of communication. So now students, you just see this is the process of communication, right? So in the process of communication, there are two sides. One is the sender and another side is the receiver. That means while you are communicating with other person, you need a sender because the sender has to send some information to you, and you have to play the role as a receiver, right? So here I am here playing the role as a sender, right? And in this process, I am trying to send some new information about communication, right? And through some proper channel. So this is the channel. Through the channel, I am trying to send my information to you, and you are the receiver. So you have to immediately receive my information. You have to try to perceive my information, and after perceiving my information, immediately you have to send your feedback to me. That means you have to send your feedback to your sender, right? So that sender can understand that you have all the information you have understood or not, right? So if the information is not understandable, then the sender has to send the same information to the receiver. So that is why communication is a process, right? Here one side is the sender and another side is the receiver. So sender has to send some information or some message through some proper channel to the receiver, and receiver has to perceive the information, and after perceiving, the receiver has to send the feedback to the sender through some proper channel, right? And in this process, the communication, we are encoder and the decoder we have, right? So here the sender is called the encoder because I am trying to encoding you, because I am sending some information. So that information is called encoding, right? So here I am playing the role as a encoder and you are the decoder because you are the receiver, you are receiving my information. So that is why the communication is a process, and in this process one side is the sender, another side is the receiver, and while the sender is sending the information, that process is called encoding, and while you are receiving the information, this is called decoding, right? So you are the decoder, I am the encoder here, and this is the process of communication. Hope you understood the process of communication. Now we are moving to the types of communication, right? So while the people are communicating with each other, a number of ways that depend upon the message and its context in which it being sent, right? Because how I am going to send my information, that is totally depend upon my message or my information. So the types of communication, especially it is divided into two types. One is the verbal communication and another one is the non-verbal communication, right? So verbal and non-verbal communication, these are the two types of the communication process. So first, the verbal communication, right? So when we say about the verbal communication, it refers to the form of communication in which the message is transmitted verbally. So here I am trying to transmit all my information verbally, right? So this is the verbal communication, and communication is done by word of mouth and a piece of writing. And sometimes I can send the information in a writing mood, and sometimes I can use some word of my mouth, right? And in verbal communication, this is the case we have to, every time we must have to follow these rules. That means while you are communicating with other person, your information should be short and simple, so that the other side, the receiver, can easily receive or perceive your information, right? So verbal communication, we must have to maintain KISS, right? KISS. KISS means keep in short and simple, so that the receiver can receive your information properly and they can send immediate feedback to you, right? So again, when we say about the verbal communication, it is again divided into two types. One is the oral communication and second one is the written communication. So every time we are using both the communication, oral and written. So when we say about the oral communication, it is the spoken words are used, right? So this is the oral communication, right? Because I am speaking something, right? I'm sending the information through my voice, and it includes the face-to-face conversation, speech. It may be the telephonic conversation, it may be the video, radio, television, voice over internet, everything. These are internet. It's related to the oral communication, and it is influenced by the pitch, volume, speed and clarity of speaking, so that the other side, the receiver, can easily understand all the information, right? So while you are orally communicated with other person, you must be conscious about your pitch, right? About the volume. Volume is very important. The speed, right? If the speed, you are not maintaining the speed while you are communicating, then also the other person cannot understand. And the clarity of speaking, that is why while you are speaking or while you are orally communicate with other person, you must be very much consciously speak, right? Because the other party is influenced by your pitch, your volume, your speed and clarity of speaking, right? So this is very much important, the oral communication. The second one is the written communication. So written communication, we all have that idea of written communication, because nowadays we are using different kind of written communication, like we are using the WhatsApp, we are using Facebook, we are using email, right? Mail to other persons. So these all are written communication, right? So in written communication, written signs or symbols are specially used to communicate with others, right? In written communication, messages can be transmitted via email. We can send the letter, we can send the report, right? We can use all those things for written communication. And written communication is most common form of communication which is being used in, especially in business. Nowadays too, in the field of education also, we are using the written communication, right? So written communication, these are some signs or these are some signals we are sending through some writing material. It may be through some message, through email, right? To letter, we can send the information from one to another. This is called written communication. So both these two are verbal communication. In verbal communication, one is the oral communication and second one is the written communication. These are the two types of verbal communication. So next comes the non-verbal communication, right? So when we say about a non-verbal communication, it is the sending or receiving the wordless messages. So this is very much important for us. So while we are communicating, we must be conscious about our non-verbal cues because these are the wordless messages, right? Such as our gestures, our body language, our posture, our tone of voice, our facial expression, which is related to our non-verbal communication, right? It is all about the body language of the speaker because speaker body language is very much important. How the communicator, how the sender is sending information. Yes, everyone is everyone is receiving the information. While they are receiving the information, they are also looking at the sender, right? And they are also influenced by the sender non-verbal cues. So the sender must be very much conscious about the non-verbal cues like the gestures, the body language, the pitch of voice, the tone of voice, and the facial expression, right? Because all our behavior and our personality we can see in a facial expression. So that is very much important part of the communicator. And when we say about the non-verbal communication, it has specially three elements. One is the appearance of the speaker, right? Appearance is very much important because already I have told you the appearance means the clothing of the sender, right? The hairstyle, the neatness and use of cosmetics, these are also sometimes very important. And also the surrounding, the room size, right? The lighting, the decorations, the furnishing, these are also influential factor in our communication process. So that means while you are communicating with others, so other persons were they are imitating your behavior as well as they are also looking at your clothing, hairstyle, neatness and use of cosmetic, everything. So and secondly the body language of the sender, right? So body language, it includes the facial expression, gestures and postures, right? These are also very much important factor of non-verbal communication, right? And the sound. So sound means the voice tone, the volume and the speech rate, the speed of the voice. So these are very much important, right? Voice tone, the pitch, right? Up and down, like so these are the speech rate, right? Speed of the voice. So these are some important factor of non-verbal communication. So while you are communicating with others, the appearance, your body language and sounds, right? These are also some influential factor of our communication process. And these are non-verbal communication because verbally while you are communicating with other person, the other side will looking at your all kind of behavior, right? Not only your external one, your internal behavior is also they are looking. So that's why you must be conscious about your appearance, about sound of your voice, your body language, everything, right? So that they can easily send or the receiver can easily send the feedback to you. So non-verbal communication, so this is the meaning of non-verbal communication. So one is the verbal communication. So when you are verbally like to communicate with others, it may be sometimes orally, it may be sometimes written communication. So this is verbal, and non-verbal is related to some cues, right? We are using our facial expression, our eye contact, eye movement, body language, right? Body movement, hand movement, head movement. So everything is related to non-verbal communication. Though we are consciously not doing everything, but other side, the receiver, they are every time they are looking at your behavior. So that while you are communicating, you must be conscious about your non-verbal cues, right? So these are the two types of our communication process. So next comes the level of communication, right? So the level of communication, there are different level of communication. First one is the intrapersonal communication. So that is very much important part of our life, because the communication that occurs in your own mind, this is called intrapersonal. That means while you are talking with you, that is intrapersonal communication. Every time we are talking with us, right? So, and it is the basis of our feelings, our biases, our prejudices, and our beliefs, right? So while you are taking some decision for yourself, every time we are talking with us, right, with ourselves, and that is called intrapersonal communication, right? We are not communicating with others, we are just communicating with our own mind, right? We are talking with ourselves. So that is more important. So while you are taking some decisions, so definitely you must have to talk with you, and on the basis of that only you can take any kind of decision for your life, and that is called intrapersonal communication, right? Intrapersonal communication is called the self-talk, while you are talking with yourself. So this is the level 1. Second one is the intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, which is between the two people. When you are communicating with others, that is called interpersonal, person to person, one to one, right? While you are communicating, this is called interpersonal communication. Conversation with others, right? Communicating with my children, communicating with my students, right? So this is called interpersonal communication, right? Next one is the small group communication. So while you're communicating with a small group of students, right, or a small group of people, so this is called small group communication. Next one is the one-to-group communication. That means one group or the one-to. Suppose here I am here one and you are the group of students, right? One-to group communication, right? One is person, sender is only one and receiver is one group of person. So this is called one-to group communication. So these are the levels of our communication. Next comes the barriers of communication, right? So while we're communicating, we are facing sometimes lots of problem. The other side, the receiver, they are not be able to receive our information properly or correctly because of different kind of barriers, right? In the situation, in the environment, there are different kind of barriers are there which is affecting in our communication process, right? So here, the message, we are sending some information in this process through some medium or some channel, right? So while the sender is sending the information, while it will go to the receiver, so there may be some barriers, right? So there are different kind of barriers we're going to discuss. One is the physical barrier, right? So physical barriers like the worry, like fear, guilt, right? Some negative feelings. These are called our physical barriers. So that in this reason also sometimes we cannot communicate with other person, right? If your confidence level is very low, if you have a fear, like if you have a guilt, right, guilt feeling, so then also sometimes you cannot properly communicate with other person, right? So this is called our physical barriers. Second one is the emotional barriers. So emotional barriers are very much important. Sometimes emotionally, if you are suppose like no, you are no, sometimes our emotionally we are very down, right? We are not feeling well, right? We have some kind of anxiety, some kind of tension, right? So we are unable to sometimes control our emotions. In that reason also sometimes we are not communicating with other person. And some cultural barriers, like so like we are coming from different cultures, our home cultures, family culture, school culture, right, education, everything is our different. So in this regard also sometimes it will create different kind of barriers in the classroom or other situations, right? So this is called the cultural barriers. Next, language barriers. Yes, every time we are facing this language barriers, right? Suppose like no, here in especially in the classroom with the students, they are coming from different community, from different region. So in this regard they are not communicating properly because of the language. They are not feel comfort with the other language, right? So that is why the language also sometimes it may be a very like no, a strong kind of barriers in our communication process. And sometimes the gender barriers are also there, right? Gender to gender our perception is different, so sometimes it may also create some kind of barrier in our communication process. And another one is the interpersonal barriers. So person to person, right? Suppose I am going to say something but you are suppose not listening, you are not interested to listen my words or my like no my information, you are not wanted to take or take my information. So in this regard also there is some barriers. That means I am saying something and you are not listening. So in this regard also this is called the interpersonal barriers, right? So yes, there are different kind of barriers are there in our communication process, but we must have to let no overcome all our barriers so that we can make our communication process more effective, because without communication we cannot send any kind of information to others, we cannot share our feelings and emotion to others. So that is very much important for us. So that is why we must have to overcome all the barriers of the communication process, right? So for that, firstly, we must have to take the receiver more seriously, right? Because while you are communicating with others, you must have to know the receiver behavior, right? Without knowing the receiver behavior, the sender cannot send any kind of messages. The behavior of the receiver, the attitude of the receiver, right? Uh, their level of intelligence, right, their learning strategies, the teacher or as a communicator, it is our prime duty to know about the receiver conditions, right, to know about the receiver behavior so that we can communicate properly with the receiver. And also, while you are sending some information, your information should be very much clear, right? So that the other people, the other side can understand properly. And while you are delivering your information or message, you must be a very skillful person, right? Because sometimes while you're communicating, we like with like no we feel very good while we're communicating with some person, and sometimes we don't feel good to communicate with the some other person because of the because of the while they are delivering the message, right? So that message or that information is not like, no, not, they are not skillfully sending the information, right? That is why also sometimes we are not feeling good to take or, like, no, receive this kind of information. And while we are, like, no, sending some information, we must have to focus to the receiver. Receiver is the main part in the communication process, because here I am sending some information. If you are not be able to understand my information, then definitely it will be not effective. My communication is will be not effective for you. So for that, the communicator, the sender, must have to focus on the receiver. And the sender also must have to use multiple channels to communicate instead of relying on the channel, right? So we can use different kind of channel to sending some information to the receiver. And also we must have to ensuring appropriate feedback, right? Because everything is depend upon the feedback. If the feedback is very much positive, that means yes, my communication is very good with my students. If the feedback is not too good, then definitely I must have to modify my behavior, right? And that is why we must have to ensure the appropriate feedback from the learner or from the receiver, so that we can also modify our behavior accordingly. And while the communicator is communicating, they must be aware of their own state of mind, emotions, and attitude. These are also very much important factor for the communicator, right? Because mind, physical and mental readiness, right? Physically and mentally, the teacher must be a healthy person. The teacher must have the emotional control, and the attitude of the teacher, it should be very much positive towards the students, right? Towards the receiver, so that then only the sender can send the proper information, and then only the classroom, the communication process will be more interactive, right? With the for student and the teacher, so that in this way we can overcome all the barriers of communication, right? So with this, I am going to end up my session for today, this class. So next class again we'll meet with a new topic. Thank you so much, dear students. Thank you for your attention.